record it. All right, so welcome everyone to Prader-Willi California Foundation's educational training for the school professional. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump right in. Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Okay. All right. Then I'm going to minimize this and we're going to get going. So there are a number of physiological symptoms that impact this student with the syndrome. Hypotonia is going to impact strength, balance, coordination, motor planning. That's particularly important also for your SLP to know. Cognitive limitations and impaired judgment. No matter how bright the student is, he does have cognitive limitations and he absolutely has impaired judgment. Hyperphagia is that dysfunctional appetite regulating system, which is the hallmark symptom of Prader-Willi syndrome. There are stomach issues, bowel issues, which we'll learn about quickly. Temperature regulation dysfunction is really important for your school health nurse or health personnel to know, because this student's internal temperature may not he may not have a fever. His internal temperature may not regulate properly, even if he's seriously ill or has an infection or serious illness. So students also may become way too hot and be sweating profusely, and or way too cold and not put a jacket on, because they don't really recognize the feeling of discomfort, because there's generally a very high pain threshold. So whereas you and I might get super hot or wouldn't really want to walk on a broken limb, many students with Prader-Willi syndrome really don't feel those pain signals properly. So they may walk on a broken limb or walk around with serious infection and without fever to reflect it. Self-injurious behaviors often include skin picking, occurs in like 99% of people with Prader-Willi syndrome. They'll pick their skin. Speech and language problems can increase frustration, not necessarily saying the words, but getting the language out in the way that is understood by others. Very frustrating for many students. Disordered sleep. Most people with the syndrome have disordered sleep no matter what time they go to bed at night and no matter how much sleep they get. The architecture of sleep is generally impaired, so there may be excessive daytime sleepiness and excessive irritability due to sleep issues. Temperament and behavioral issues are the other hallmark symptom of Prader-Willi syndrome, and the bulk of this training is going to be focused upon that. And almost all of the behavioral issues are tied to anxiety. So our focus always is on reducing anxiety, which we'll look at. So real quickly, that dysfunctional appetite regulating system, hyperphagia, is defined as a physiological. It's a neurological drive to eat or get food. It lasts throughout the lifetime. The brain functions as if the body is starving. It drives the person to find food or eat food or squirrel away food, hide food. It lowers the metabolic rate to almost half what it should be, and it stores consumed food as fat to, make sure that like in primitive times, if we didn't have food sources, we had a lot of fat on our body. But we're not in primitive food times anymore, but the brain doesn't know that. So the other important piece to recognize is that the vomit reflex is absent. So if this student eats too much food, eats spoiled food, rotten food, or toxic food or other toxic things, that vomit reflex that works in you and I, if we were to eat such things or drink such things or too much, doesn't work properly. So and then giving any type of emetic to expel it would just induce more toxins into the body. So if he does eat anything that is toxic, you're going to have to take him to the ER. And if vomiting does occur, that could signal a life-threatening situation. And again, you're going to have to prep for the ER. Parents should be notified immediately. Unmanaged hyperphagia plus that slow metabolic rate cause rapid weight gain and the potential for death from a stomach rupture, bowel rupture, stomach necrosis, bowel necrosis, choking because of the problems with motor planning. Choking is one of the top causes of death, and behavior problems are also a result of that unmanaged hyperphagia. Death can occur from a single overeating episode. Prader-Willi syndrome is not an eating disorder. Eating disorders are amenable to psychological intervention, psychiatric intervention, psychotropic medications. Prader-Willi syndrome is not amenable to any of those. It is a genetically based medical disorder for which there is no treatment of the hyperphagic food drive. There's no teaching the individual not to take food or steal food or eat food too fast if they believe they can or they can get away with it. Current management, state-of-the-art management in the entire world is supervision and adherence to what's called the principles of food security throughout the individual's lifetime. And we're going to look at principles of food security in a moment. No one known to be diagnosed with Prader-Willi syndrome can successfully live independently. Those who have tried have either become morbidly obese and returned to a supported residential environment, or they've died. So throughout the duration of this student's life, he's going to be living in a supported living setting. So the goal of educating this student is not to teach independent life skills that could lead to serious consequences. We're not going to be teaching him to ride public transportation, buses, Uber, independently, because these sources of transportation will take him to food. We've seen it over and over and over again, no matter how many parameters we try to put on it. We're not going to be teaching this student to use money or credit cards or balance a checkbook or balance debit cards, because money equals food to the individual with Prader-Willi syndrome. We see it over and over and over again. If we have any money whatsoever, we are purchasing food, or we're purchasing it on things of absolutely no consequence and spending frivolously. So we don't teach those skills to somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome. Students should not be subjected to cooking classes or purchasing food at the mall to teach these, money transactional skills, because this creates an enormous amount of anxiety and the potential for dangerous food-related incidents. So we've got to use we've got to teach other life skills when we're looking at this age of a student, like sorting laundry, washing their own laundry, and things of that nature. There's lots of ways we can teach life skills that don't revolve around food. That Prader-Willi syndrome hyperphagia food drive underlies many maladaptive behaviors, but there are a whole boatload of maladaptive behaviors that are neurochemically induced or based as well. And these contribute to unwanted behaviors also. Again, the basis of which almost all of these maladaptive behaviors occur outside of food are anxiety-based. People with Prader-Willi syndrome have a high degree of anxiety, unrealistic view of things, feeling out of control, worry, fear that lurk just below the surface. So they can look like they're doing just fine, but if anything goes wrong, according to what they thought was going to happen, whether it's a real or perceived stressor, they're going to react very anxiously. And if you're seeing arguing, defiance, verbal and physical aggression, elopement, these are signs potentially, probably, of anxiety. And so when you see these, the very first thing I want you to think of is, holy heck, this student is feeling a boatload of anxiety. What do we need to do to reduce it as fast as possible? Most students also will have repeated questions, excessive talking, and skin picking. These can also be reflective of anxiety. However, they're not always based on anxiety. And we'll look at those at the end of the training here. The more you're aware of Prader-Willi syndrome and what's going on underneath the behaviors and how your student thinks, the greater success you're going to have to find interventions that will be successfully interventional in nature and avoid or eliminate unwanted behaviors. So anything or anyone that raises anxiety has the potential to cause a behavior problem, which means that each and every one of you and I has the potential to cause a behavior problem where none would have existed if we hadn't been in the picture. Yikes. However, that also means that each and every one of us has the potential to reduce a behavior problem. And that's really the crux of this training, is to give you a number of strategies that will reduce anxiety, get to the heart of what could be happening with this student in terms of a maladaptive behavior, and give you specific Prader-Willi syndrome strategies that will reduce those behaviors. So the very first thing we need to look at is, what is the environment that this student is in? And because if we have an environment that is not conducive for the specifics of Prader-Willi syndrome, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to be spinning our wheels in mud. So these 5 areas are what we need to create in his environment every day for him to be successful in a school educational setting. The very first is food security. How do we create food security for somebody whose entire life is so anxiously revolving around food? Well, we do that by creating no doubt when the next meal or snack is coming, plus no hope or chance that he's going to be able to get extra food, which means if he can't get extra food, he's not going to be disappointed he didn't get extra food. And when there's no disappointment, there are no behavior problems, because most of the time when somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome is doing well and happy and, coming along, there are no behavior problems. So how do we create no doubt? This is pretty easy in a school setting. You establish routines for school, food consumption in the school setting, right? Generally, we're sending our kid to school already have eaten breakfast, then they're going to maybe have snack at school, and then they're going to have lunch at school, and then they go home and they have their after school snack. What we want you to do, though, is write the food schedule on his schedule of classes. Make sure that schedule is easily visible and accessible to him at any time. And you always want to let him know if there are any changes in that food schedule in the beginning of the day. Scheduled food has to be as reliable as breathing air. Never use food as a reward, never use food as a bribe, and never withhold food for poor behavior. I think we were using some food gift cards as a way to manage behavior on the bus. That's a big no-no, because that's a bribe and that will backfire. So we're going to have to figure out a way to fix that. And I'll work with a pod of you to figure out how to fix that, because I've been flown from Southern California to Northern California when we had used food as an incentive and a reward on a bus setting. And now we can't get the student off the bus. And now this is holding us hostage for food. So it will backfire on you every time. So we've got to fix that. And we'll work on that later. No hope or chance is where it is most problematic, generally at a school setting, actually in every setting in the universe, in the community. No hope or chance is the hardest to obtain for somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome. Access to food creates hope to get that food. Hope to get that food creates anxiety. How am I going to get that food? And anxiety creates the potential for unwanted behaviors. Any anxiety creates the potential for unwanted behavior. And if food is available, or the student thinks food is available, this student can do little else but anxiously think of ways to get that food. So how do we manage that? We eliminate access to food to reduce his anxiety and the potential for a behavior problem. Hard to do, because Everywhere, food is ubiquitous. But here are some strategies that have been helpful for other teachers in the past. So we put away all the students' snack bags, backpacks. We just put them away. We put all the food in a backpack. If the student can manage that while the backpacks are in the classroom, great. Some students can't manage it. We put them all outside the classroom. We remove candy dishes from the teacher's desk. We remove all visible foods from the classroom. We lock food away if there is food in the classroom. Some teachers have said no students, because students are really good about sneaking food without teachers even knowing it. Some teachers have said we have a big ant problem, you guys. So there is no food allowed in the classroom because ants are a huge problem. And so, in order to avoid having to, call out a student, this student, no one should eat in front of this individual unless food is also available to him. And then you're going to establish the rules for the type of quantity of food before there's any outings or field trips. We want you to kind of put a lock on the thought that he can get food and never give into a tantrum, especially for food. If you believe the student has gotten food, you're not going to question him. Hey, did you eat those chips? Because this student is going to feel a boatload of anxiety. One, either lying to you, no, I didn't eat them, or two, being honest with you, yes, I did eat them, and now worried about how you're going to react to that. Rather, we presume that the food was eaten and we state it as a fact. Okay, I see these chips are gone. Then you're going to need to take responsibility for this student gaining access to food. This is the nature of his disability. His brain is driven to get food. So if he got it, it ain't on him. That's his disability. It's on us. So you're going to let him know, okay, I see those chips are gone. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. So you stay safe, and then you secure that food source. However that student got food, you've got to make sure he can't get food that way anymore. And then without this individual knowing, you're going to advise his parents about what food was eaten so they can reduce calories for future meals to compensate for additional consumed calories. Remember, I said the metabolic rate is about half what it should be. Students with Prader-Willi syndrome, no matter what age they are, will gain weight on more than 2 fruits a day, right? More than 2 apples a day, he's going to gain weight from those calories. So you can imagine how much weight is gained if he's eating a bag of chips here, a donut or 2 there. And this student is thin and has always been thin, which means family, is working hard to keep him food safe at home, but his hyperphagic food drive has kicked in big time in the last couple of years. And because he's always been thin, and now coupled with that drive to get food that's biochemically kicked in, people who have always been thin are at greater risk for death from even one food episode. So it's really critically important this student is never allowed on campus unsupervised, because if he's allowed on campus unsupervised, he is going to be looking and he's going to be finding food on campus. One of the best places students find food is in the bathroom, trash can. I know we've got some issues with the student in the bathroom. Lots of times that's kind of how it starts, is we found food in the bathroom. And I don't know whether this is true for this student or not, but if we found food in the bathroom once, that's our go-to place to look for food again. Higher cognitive abilities and verbal skills don't mean this individual can override his drive to get food. Doesn't work. People with limited intellectual functioning, on the other hand, can be brilliant at obtaining food. And the ability to plan really complex, complicated arrangements to get food, it doesn't really generalize into other areas of life. It's a savant skill for people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And even the most honest person with Prader-Willi syndrome may lie, cheat, or steal when it comes to food. That's just a symptom of Prader-Willi syndrome. Behavior problems are often related to unsecured food sources somewhere. So once all food sources are restricted with locks or secured with people, then anxiety is generally reduced and behaviors improve across all areas. Don't remove food or actually any item out of the hands of this student unless it's dangerous that he has it. And then you got to do what you got to do, because this will generally always induce a pretty significant behavioral outburst. Routines are pretty easy to institute at the school setting, because you guys live on routines. Routines reduce anxiety, so you establish those as with everything. You create those daily routines, and what's important is you write them on the schedule or a visual chart, and you refer to them to avoid arguments, and you advise him if there are any changes in that day's schedule in order to reduce his anxiety when it happens unexpectedly. Rules, again, are pretty easy in a school setting. People with Prader-Willi syndrome are huge rule followers because it reduces their own anxiety to know how to function at school. So establish those. They're not intended to be punitive, right? They're intended to give structure so the student knows what's expected of him and how everybody else is supposed to function. Establish rules for the classroom, lunch, library, recess, and talk about those rules with him. Accessing the school nurse is important. If this student is expending a lot of energy just making it through the day, he may be having a lot of stomach aches or headaches or somatic complaints. And so we may want to talk about how to build into his schedule accessing the school nurse and making that a rule. Administrators and principals are often seen as a hierarchical go-to person. If teacher is saying, honey, we're going to be able to do that later, and we're not doing that right now, we're going to do it later. The student often may use the hierarchy at school. So you're going to maybe want to create rules with him about how you schedule a meeting with the principal about this issue. When something is understood as a rule, it's more likely to be followed, especially if the student had input into creating that rule. So involve him as often as you can in creating the rules, and then post them, whether it's in his notebook or in the classroom setting somewhere, so that you can refer to them. And always let him know you get to change the rules if they need to be changed, not him. Boundaries are critically important in the environment of somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome because they keep him feeling safe, knowing that the boundaries within the buoys, to use this concrete example, are where he needs to function, right? If he's going outside the buoy boundaries, and even though he's pushing to get outside those buoy boundaries, once he gets out there, he's going to feel a whole boatload of anxiety. And even though he feels powerful and in control because he's pushed outside the boundaries, now his anxiety is boundless because he could be swept away into the waves, and he knows that. So keep him within the boundaries as best you can. And how do we do that? With your authority, with your praise, with your positive reinforcers. Don't be authoritarian, because authoritarian styles do not mix with anybody with Prader-Willi syndrome, because they inherently remove control from the individual, and they also activate Prader-Willi syndrome's natural oppositional thinking. So we want you to be the fair authority. You need to put that down, sweetie. That's not for you. You need to put that down. Authoritative, and be gently firm with your authority, never promising something that you can't follow through on, and never threatening to remove a privilege. If you don't put that down, you're going to lose lunch period today, especially with food. Never threaten to remove food, but don't threaten to remove privileges. If you don't hurry up, you're going to miss library privilege today. If the student likes library, that is not going to incentivize him to hurry up. It's going to create another behavior around, don't remove my library privilege. And it won't speed him up whatsoever. It will backfire on you. And don't allow yourself to be manipulated. If he manipulates you, then he's pushed beyond the boundaries, and now he feels very powerful and way anxious because he needs to have boundaries around him. So if you find he's trying to manipulate too much, let us know, and we'll focus with you on strategies for that. Calm responses from you, pretty easy also at the school level. You're not going to be yelling at the student. You're not going to be, showing him how angry you are at him. You're just going to be responding to him calmly, empathetically, kind of like you could really care less what behavior he's doing. You're just going to be responding to a temper tantrum with indifference, boredom, keeping him in the periphery of your eye, but not giving any attention to that behavior at all. And then waiting out the poor behaviors. And this person is really tenacious at waiting you out. So this is a toughie, I know that. But the more we can wait him out in safe ways, as we're utilizing some other strategies, the better off we'll be in the long run. Do know that lying in order to avoid blame or confabulating, making up stories out of whole cloth are symptoms of Prader-Willi syndrome. Not everybody has the symptom of confabulating or making up stories, but those who do often confabulate false allegations of abuse or just amazing stories that are presented where you believe that this actually happened when it actually didn't. So I don't know if this student confabulates, but if he does, we can talk about that too, how you manage some of that. Don't give in to a tantrum, because if you give in to a tantrum, even about a small thing today, you think, he's just tantruming over this stupid little eraser. Okay, have it. That teaches him that you will give in if he's just yells a little louder, becomes a little more aggressive, or waits you out a little longer. So long term, you've got to think about upholding your boundaries with empathy and not giving in. So don't give in to a tantrum. So all of those are the environmental basics that we've got to create for the student with Prader-Willi syndrome. Now we're going to look at the neurological basics that we need to create and use with our student with Prader-Willi syndrome. And the very first of that is empathy as an intervention base. So empathy is the ability to see another person's perspective, to understand and share the feelings of another person. Most people with Prader-Willi syndrome do not possess this ability because it's a neurocognitive deficit. So we have to see things from his perspective in order to manage our interactions with him better. So I love this cartoon because it really does nicely illustrate what we're talking about. So this student is saying it's a 9. It's a 9. We need it to be a 9. It's got to be a 9. And you say, no, honey, it's a 6. It's a 6. We got to have it be a 6. It's a 9. No, it's a 6. No, it's a 9. You're in a major power struggle where you're never going to win and convince this student anything, any way other than than his belief that it's a 9, until you see it from his perspective and I get it. You see a 9. I understand. You see a 9. Now you've created empathy, and from that we can produce some strategy to get him to see your perspective. Empathy is successful because it gets to the core of anxiety, disappointment, frustration. It gets you out of a power struggle with this student, right? Out of this power struggle. And it puts you and your student on the same team, working to collaboratively solve this problem. So once he feels you're on his team and you're working with him rather than against him, you're going to be golden. Okay. At its most basic form, an empathetic response from you can be simply repeating the exact words that your student has used. Other words or phrases that can convey your empathy and understanding include, I get it. You think X. I understand. You think X. I understand. You think it. I get it. You would like X. I totally get it. You really want X. What a bummer. What a bummer. What a disappointment. Yeah, you wanted to go to library today. What a disappointment. The schedule got changed. That's not fair. The schedule got changed. I get it. It's not fair. It's totally awful. The schedule got changed, right? These are empathetic responses that will get to the heart and soul of reducing the student's upset. Empathy is neither agreeing nor disagreeing, and it is definitely not giving in to the student. It is simply communicating that you understand his perspective, want, need, concern, whatever it is. And once he feels you understand what his concern is, he doesn't really need to turn the volume up of it to get you to understand. He's not going to yell louder, be more aggressive, or escalate it. And then it's so that it's really important that it goes counterintuitive, that you meet his upset with the same level of upset, right? So it's not fair that library was canceled today. I get it, you're going to say. It's not fair. I get it. It's not fair. Don't be afraid to match his level of intensity, because when you do, he feels heard and he doesn't need to escalate it anymore. Genuine empathy does not make things worse. And this goes very counterintuitive. As care providers, we generally really want, it's okay, honey, we're going to have library tomorrow. And everything will be, you'll get to check out your book tomorrow. It really doesn't matter about tomorrow. It's in this moment right now. You've got to get to empathy. Okay. So if it's okay, honey, doesn't work for you, if he doesn't say immediately, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know, then immediately go to empathy. What a bummer. You're so disappointed about library. Only after you are certain that he gets that you're on his team, then you can begin to collaboratively problem solve with him. So how do you think we could do this? What other options do you think we have? If library is closed today, what a bummer. How do you think we can manage the situation? Isn't this awful? Do you think we could, read a book like we're pretending we're in the library, or do you think we could just be sad about it for 3 minutes, right? Using preferred choices to help problem solve with him. Never try to talk this student out of his upset, because he's just going to feel the need to express more upset to get you to understand. So if your offer again is, it's okay, honey, don't worry about it, isn't immediately met with, okay, thanks for helping me, go immediately to empathy. What a bummer. I totally get it. This is awful. Don't use logic and reasoning, because he's not going to respond to your logic and reasoning. And you can think of a billion brilliant ways to get him to see that you're right, library was canceled today, but all he's going to hear you telling him is he's wrong, that the library is not canceled today. And as we'll see, that won't go well for you. So use empathy. And don't engage in a power struggle. Again, you're constrained by logic and reasoning, and he's not constrained by logic and reasoning at all. He's going to think of, fanciful things to get you to give him what he's wanting or needing or whatever it is to win the argument. So sometimes it's helpful to say, okay, we've talked about this a whole lot. So I'm going to say one more thing, and then you say one more thing, and then we'll be all done and we'll talk about something else. And then don't say another word. Literally let him have the last word, and then just shift your attention elsewhere. Don't argue. Again, that's a power struggle. You're never going to win. Use empathy. And distraction can be very helpful if used after empathy. Our next intervention is paint the picture. Very often you'll probably use this already because you already know that knowing what to expect reduces anxiety. So when you front load this student with what's going to be happening next, especially if you're going into a new situation, a new classroom, a new setting, a new schedule, a new person coming into the picture, anything new, you're definitely going to want to paint the picture of what that's all going to look like. There is no attention to detail too much. Paint that picture so he knows what to expect. Do expect that what happens this time is expected to occur next time. And disappointment's going to happen if it doesn't happen this time, because he was thinking it was going to, because it happened last time. So if you don't want, if it's not going to happen this time, then you've got to fix that. You've got to paint a new picture, right? We do that by fixing a past goof. We fix that picture. So again, anything that happened in the past is expected to occur in the future. So if something that happened in the past needs to change, you got to paint a new picture and present new advance notice of what change is going to happen. That also goes to if something happened in the past that he didn't want to happen, you've got to let him know, I know that happened last time and you didn't want that to happen. This time, that's not going to happen, honey. So you're okay. You won't be, disappointed, or you won't be surprised or something. So the guidelines for fixing that are, hey, are this, right? First, to bring up the issue that needs fixing. Hey, remember the last time we went to the library and got a lollipop on the way out? Incorporate empathy. Remind the individual how great or bad that was, right? That was pretty cool, huh? You got a lollipop on the way out. Yeah. Preface the fix by letting the individual know the benefit to him of the change. Pardon me. We always want to do what's best for you, right? Because we care about you. And then you introduce the fix. So this time when we leave the library, nobody's going to get a lollipop. You're not going to get a lollipop because that's just healthier for you and the other students as well. Okay. So those are your guidelines for fixing past goofs. Presenting persons with Prader-Willi syndrome with preferred choices is absolutely critical because Prader-Willi syndrome causes oppositionalism, and the brain's automatic reaction is typically to respond with no, which looks like oppositional, defiant, and argumentative behavior, right? So avoid yes, no questions. Offer win-win preferred choices, your preferred choices, to reduce the oppositionalism and improve his cooperation. Make everything the individual's choice and within your preferred win-win options to give him the experience of control, but not too much actual control. Okay. So for instance, if your choices for your classroom, entire classroom setup are, you can either put your backpack on the hook or under your chair. It's up to you. Then those are the options you present him. Do you want to work on this project for another 5 minutes or 7 minutes? Even though most people with the syndrome have no concept of time and time passage, that those are way too abstract concepts, you can still use time as a boundary, as a nice concrete boundary. Do you want to watch me set the timer? Because passage of time is meaningless. So timers are going to be your best friend. Or do you not want to watch me set the timer, right? Everything can be a choice to empower this student to follow the rules within your preferred choice boundaries. Open-ended questions often create anxiety, right? Where do you want to put your backpack? Too much anxiety, right? Do you want to put it under your chair or on the hook? Now you've got some cooperation going your way. Avoid ambiguity. We'll see maybe later can create anxiety. So use I don't know. As soon as I know, I'll let you know. And avoid hurrying with your words. Most students, because it piques their, it touches upon their oppositionalism. Okay, student, hurry up. We don't want to be late to library. Sometimes students will go slower when they hear hurry up. So instead, with this student, and typically we say, this is where the aid comes in handy, but, both teachers, one to address the whole class, the other maybe to focus on this student during transition times. You know what? The student, we've really got to hurry. Ready? Might be just enough to energize the student without using the words to hurry or motivate. Allow lots of time for the student to process past his oppositionalism or through his slower processing speed, if he has slow processing speed skills, and then build in extra time wherever you go. This is typically where the aid is really important, because students often lag behind, and so it can be hard. If the student has obsessive compulsive tendencies, this is where preferred choices can be very helpful. Our next intervention is disguise your nose. Unlike many disabilities, people with Prader-Willi syndrome are extraordinarily sensitive to the words we use, the phraseology we use. They're no matter what cognitive level they're functioning. So anything that looks, sounds, or smells like a frustrator could lead to a behavior problem. And the word no and the words but are an inherent frustrator. So use them sparingly. So if he's saying, I want to go to lunch now, right? Me too. I love lunch hour. Did you bring a good lunch today? As soon as we finish math, we'll leave for lunch. Instead of, no, it's not time for lunch. We don't want you to use no, because that's an inherent frustrator. Now you're arguing about the option. But if you use those positive, me too, I really want to go too, then that can be helpful. Now, I know this student kind of plows through. He's got it in his head. I want what I want when I want it, which is now, and I'm going to go. So that's a specific intervention that we'll have to focus on. How do we reduce that behavior going forward? It's beyond the scope of this basic training, though. So we'll work with you on that as in a smaller group setting. Use empathy. If this student is wanting something, use empathy and use the broken record technique. Yes, as soon as we finish math, we'll go to lunch. Yes, as soon as we finish math, we'll go to lunch. Schedule non-preferred activities or tasks before preferred activities or tasks. So first math, and then we go to lunch. If you're having some trouble with a particular subject. Keep the person thinking rather than spiraling into a deeper negative feeling. People with Prader-Willi syndrome don't talk things out in a cathartic way. Generally, when they're talking about an issue, they're talking and talking and talking, and the feeling is getting bigger and bigger. So we want them to get out of that feeling as fast as possible. Allow for their possibility of rightness. Very helpful intervention, because people with Prader-Willi syndrome have a strong need to be right at all times and at all costs. They want to look competent, they want to look good, and disagreements can very quickly turn into power struggles that have a life or death feel to them, because being wrong to the person with Prader-Willi syndrome feels deathly intolerable. It's at the brain level. So allow for the possibility of his rightness to avoid power struggles. So if you're, la, 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 talking about how beautiful the sky is blue, and he says, no, it's not, it's orange. You might be right. That's an interesting thought. I never thought of that. I like how you think. But you're not going to use, if you're trying to teach 2 + 2 is 4, and he says, no, it's not, it's 5. You're not going to use, you might be right as a strategy. That would be silly. What you are going to use is, well, that's an interesting thought, huh? You think 2 plus 2 is 5, and I'm pretty sure 2 plus 2 is 4. Huh, I wonder why you think that. And then stop talking. Allow his oppositional brain to unfix, to disengage by just letting it be, floating in the air. And most of the time, students will come around and they'll be telling you it was their idea that 2 plus 2 is 4. Anticipate that lying or denying guilt to get out of trouble is just part and parcel of this syndrome, and don't get into a power struggle over that. Because most people with Prader-Willi syndrome believe they should know something, even if they've never been taught it before. Big problem at the school setting, right? It can be helpful to teach things as if you believe he already knows it. So as an example of this, at the end of the day, our routine is you think about what homework you've got, you put those books and those papers in your backpack, right? You already know that. Great job, honey, great job. So you're teaching as if he already knows it, but you're teaching this new skill. Do role model that it's okay to make a mistake. That's generally very hard for people with Prader-Willi syndrome to accept within themselves. Intervention number 8, using his egocentrism to your advantage. PWS's neurochemistry typically interferes with the ability for him to see things from anybody else's perspective other than his own. So this is self-centeredness and egocentrism. He's going to think about himself first and foremost. So use it to your advantage to increase his cooperation, right? Don't say, if you don't hurry, the whole class is going to be late to the library, because he could care less if the whole class is late to the library. But if you say something like, hey, if we get to the library on time, then we get to come back to class and have our snack on time. Now he's motivated to get to the library on time, as an example. Don't say your yelling is disturbing the other students, because if he's yelling, he is advocating for himself. He's upset about something he is or isn't getting. And he is not, he's not going to calm down until he thinks you get why he's upset and are going to be helpful in some way to help get him what he wants. People with Prader-Willi syndrome are usually really good self-advocates. They know what they want. They just go after it in completely inappropriate ways. So use to your advantage his egocentrism. When you speak softly and manage your body, then we can talk more about what you might want to get. Okay. Teach the other person's perspective. Very problematic for most people with Prader-Willi syndrome who are very egocentric. So if people are laughing in the hallways, often people will think, well, they were laughing at me. And it's really hard to change that mindset, but we really need to start introducing those concepts or helping fix those misunderstandings. Sometimes it can be really helpful to use his egocentrism to your advantage with things like, hey, now that you're, I think he's 15 years old, I wonder if you're mature enough to lead the class to the library. I don't know, though. I don't know. Do you think you're mature enough to lead the class to the library? And most students will perk right up and, yes, I am. And they want to have that special task or job or be seen as mature. And so they'll rise to the occasion. So use that to your advantage. Most people have very poor internal motivation, which leads us to our intervention number 9, motivate them externally. Okay. Your verbal praise, encouragement, high fives, their ability to earn special time with somebody that they really want to be with, earning special privileges, being the special helper. And then these are all motivating, positively motivating. Any reward systems that you've got going on that utilize tokens and stickers and things he can earn towards something usually very motivating for persons with the syndrome. The attention span with which tokens or reward systems are motivating can be very short. So you've got to continuously find the thing that is motivating and switch it up, is the caveat to that, though. Participate in things alongside the individual, so if this individual in PE class is not really wanting to move quickly, stand next to him and go with him as a way to pull him to doing a little more physical activity. If the student has a hard time getting up and doing or moving more quickly, we'll work with you to teach you the lead like a mama duck strategy. Again, never use food as a reward, motivator, incentive, or punishment, because it will backfire on you big time. Do remember that executive functioning deficits are common. So this student is going to need support throughout his lifetime with things such as planning, prioritizing, organizing, problem solving, self-monitoring, self-regulating, paying attention, beginning tasks, multitasking, meeting deadlines, time management. He's going to need help always and forever with these things. Our job is to maximize whatever skills he has in these areas, but he's going to need help. Common sense, remember, is always impaired. So is judgment. And then help him by guiding him to conclusions with your preferred choice options, rather than problem solving for him. Well, you've lost your papers, and so let's go get you some other ones. Help him, problem solve. What could we do to get those papers? Do you think we could go back to the teacher and ask, or do you think we could go back online and download them? Guide him to conclusions to help him problem solve. And then delusional grandiosity is a concept where it's really important at least at all ages. For instance, if this during PE class there's swimming, and you ask the student, "Can you swim?" and he says, "Oh yes, I'm a great swimmer. I got a medal in swimming once," right? So you think, "Oh, at least I don't have to, worry too much about him in swimming. He's a really good swimmer." He could get in the pool and drown in a heartbeat because he's delusionally grandiose about his actual ability. So monitor for safety until you know him. Our final intervention as we wind down here is using transition prompts to increase his flexibility. Many people with Prader-Willi syndrome have attention deficits. At the same time, they often exhibit hyper focus on what they're doing in the moment, which makes it really hard to transition from one task to the next or one activity to the next, even if the next task or activity is a preferred one. So we really want you to use those limited preferred choices. Hey, we're going to be moving to the library. So do you want to start getting ready in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, right? And then you chose 5 minutes? Great, okay. Then use those transition prompts to help prepare his brain for the move. Okay, 5 minutes, then we'll be moving. Okay, 4 minutes, about time you start putting your pencil away. Okay, 3 minutes, let's start rinsing out our paintbrushes or whatever, okay? And then praise, praise, praise when he makes any movement towards cooperating. Great job rinsing out your paintbrush, student, fantastic. Provide lots of empathy if he's not able to stop on time. Again, this is where your second teacher is going to be coming in really handy, because a lot of times students have a hard time stopping. I know it's really, really hard to stop, right? And you don't want to stop. Lots of empathy. And you chose 5 minutes, and so it is time to stop. But that's not going to help him necessarily stop in that moment until he realizes or understands or learns what boundaries are. So you're going to have to stay with him while the rest of the class transitions. Excessive talking, repeated questions, very common in students. So are we going to the library today? Are we going to the library today? Are we going to the library today? If you've answered that question 3 times, now you're going to assess for a short-term memory deficit. You know what, honey, I've answered your question 3 times. You tell me, are we going to the library today? If he says correctly, yes, we're going to the library today. Now you know it's not a short-term memory deficit, which are common in students with the syndrome. That could reflect anxiety. So you want to assess for what could be making this student anxious about going to the library today. Excessive questions and lots of talking could also reflect, though, his desire to connect with you, engage in conversations with you, and keep that going. So you're going to help him monologue less and dialogue more, especially helping him connect with peers, which is often hard. Also, nonverbal learning disability is, I believe, undiagnosed in many students with Prader-Willi syndrome, and talking outside, just monologue, is often a symptom of nonverbal learning disability. We want to manage that. Don't use negative consequences and punishment with your student with Prader-Willi syndrome. It will backfire on you. It is all about positive behavior supports. Again, never use food as a reward or punishment. Remember, as the professional provider, you are absolutely critical to the health and safety and overall quality of life of this student. Bear in mind, though, that even if you use all of these strategies brilliantly, it's not going to eliminate problems forever and always. That's Prader-Willi syndrome, and actually that's just life. But when you're utilizing these strategies more often, or all the time, more often than not, what you've got is a greatly increased and improved flow of the day. That's increased fun for everybody in your classroom, including your student with the syndrome. So on his behalf and on behalf of his family, I thank you. My contact information is within your handouts, which you should have a handout of this PowerPoint presentation. And so now I know we have no time left, but I'll stop the share and answer whatever questions we might have time for. I had told a couple of you before you're gonna notice that your head was blown off because it's a lot of information very, very, very quickly. Any questions before we stop?
Yeah, we had a question. We
Yeah.
noticed like OCD type behaviors with like erasing something or washing his hands, things like that. Is that something that you see often?
Yeah, obsessive compulsive symptoms are very common in most people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And we usually, it is not a disorder because he's perfectly fine doing what he's doing. People who have obsessive compulsive disorder are not fine with, they feel a lot of anxiety when to try to not engage in the behavior. But students with Prader-Willi syndrome feel anxiety because you're telling them not to engage in the behavior. They're fine with it, right? So boundary that with your preferred choices. Do you want to wash your hands for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, or 1 minute or 3 minutes? Okay, I'll set the timer, right? And then, okay, you're all done washing your hands, to try and boundary those obsessive compulsive tendencies. We can't call it a disorder. It is a disorder, but not in the psychiatric sense of the word, right? And it's very interfering often with flows of day, right? But boundary it as best you can. Does that help, Zach?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, everything can be boundaries with preferred choices. He really needs boundaries. He's just excessively thinking he runs the ship, and we've got to rein that in so that he's not operating from a highly anxious, I'm going to do what I want to do and nobody can stop me place. It's very,
So I have a question that goes along with that. So
Yeah.
we've been having problems with him spending hours at a time in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And the only time that he comes out is when it's snack time and when
Yeah.
it's time to eat lunch.
Yep.
And then he goes right back to the bathroom. So
Yeah.
how would you suggest redirecting him out of the bathroom and back into the classroom to do study?
So that now sounds like total avoidance behavior, right? I'm not going to do anything in school other than eat, and you can't do anything about it. So this is really tough. So there's a strategy called the day stops here. And what that says is when we're having avoidance behaviors, is we have to teach him that avoidance behaviors will no longer work. That when he leaves the bathroom to get his snack, he will not be having his snack immediately. He will be doing a little bit of all the work he missed and then have his snack. So he's going to have to do the things that he was trying to avoid, and then he'll have his snack. So for instance, if he comes, but you're going to have to front load this with him, right? So we fix the past goof. You know what, honey? In the past, when you've gone into the bathroom and then you stayed in the bathroom until it's snack time, and then you've had your snack, and then you go back in the bathroom, and then you've stayed in the bathroom until lunchtime, pardon me, right? We've done that, right? Well, guess what? That wasn't really good for you, was it? No, that's not helping you one bit. And we always want to do what's good for you. Introducing the fix, right? So this time and from now on, we always want to do what's in your best interest. So this time, if you go into the bathroom, right, when you come out, we will be doing a little bit at least of what you missed. So if you stay till snack time, before you get your snack, we'll do a little bit of English, then we'll do a little bit of math, and then you'll get your snack. Okay? And this is not going to go over well. He will push back. He's not going to say, oh, okay. He will push back because that's what he's used to doing. Okay. And so you're going to have to kind of, I'm so much empathy. This is terrible. It's not fair. And we're going to do a little bit of, and then spell it out. 3 math problems and 3 English problems. And then you get your snack. And you've got to hold firm to that. You don't give in. Right. And then same, you know, you've got that's the strategy that you must use in whatever way he's avoiding, because now it's total avoidance behavior for sure.
So I had a question in terms of a major change that we've had at our school is that we are now mandated by the state to serve student
Correct.
meals, which we were not before. So now we do have a fully functioning student kitchen in which we serve, you know, breakfast and lunch for all the students. And it's in pretty close proximity to the classroom. It's actually just down the hall from the classroom. And it's also right by the bathroom. And so I'm wondering what kind of effect that might be having on the students. And, you know, we said, even though, you know, he's not like around the food, his parents have opted him out of, you know, eating the meals at school. He still brings all his own meals. I'm sure, you know, we've speculated he has to be smelling it. He has to know that it's there. The other kids are accessing it.
Yep.
So other than kind of, you know, what we've done is, you know, we have our premises kind of locked down to only the staff who are serving. The kids all come up at a specific time to get their meals. Is there anything else you can think of that we might help to, you know, do to help him navigate this new thing at the school?
Boy,
It's a challenge. Big challenge.
I can appreciate that. There was a school I worked with where the school was kind of built in a circle, and then, you know, you kind of crossed to go from class to class. Every activity was built around this. And guess what was in the middle of the circle? The cafeteria, which all the food was laid out. So, and the food and, snacks and fruits and that the students could grab on their way to their next class. I mean, the student was not able to participate in this school, period. Out of the school, got to find another school because there's no way around it. Okay, you guys, and so I don't know what your situation is. If it may be that part of his running to the bathroom, I'm just wondering, is that puts me a little closer proximity to potentially getting that food, right? Are they going to just leave me in here if I and forget me, and then I have an opportunity to get the food? So I would address it very straight out with this student. You know what, honey, I've noticed that you're spending a lot of time in the bathroom. And if you notice it's around the time that snack is served or the smells are, ask him, do you smell the food? Does it bother you? Can you smell it? Does it, he may or may not be honest with you, right? And it may not even be conscious, right? He may not have the insight to say, yes, I smell it and it really bothers me, or yes, I'm trying to get closer to it. But a lot of times I've had students say, yeah, and I'm kind of waiting for somebody to leave their post so I can go get it. So make sure you're letting the student know, even if you are locking yourself in the bathroom, you will always be supervised. You will not have an opportunity, spell it right out, paint this picture hugely. You will not have the opportunity to get food. There will always be someone who's supervising you to make sure that doesn't happen. So, make sure that and then do your best to make sure it can't happen. Because if it happened once, he's going to think it can happen again. I mean, of course, right?
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful just to have that conversation with him.
Yes. Yep. I think having very clear boundary conversations with people, even guessing, even if they say, no, that's not it, having those clear conversations can be helpful. It can eliminate the hope or reduce the hope by letting him know, how he's thinking, so he's not going to be able to get away with it.
All right. Any other questions for Lisa? Thank you so much, Lisa. Your time was invaluable. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to brainstorm, anytime you want to look at a specific scenario, Zach, you just give me a holler, okay? Or any of y'all.
Thank you. We appreciate it so much.
I appreciate
All
the
right,
time
guys.
that you've put in the past to help out.
Sorry, say again.
I was just saying I appreciate the time that you've taken in the past to help out.
Anytime. That's why I'm here. So I'll email you, Eunice and Zach. I think you're the only two I've been working with. I'll email you the link to the YouTube Zoom, and then you can.
That would be wonderful. And we'll
as-
share with staff who weren't able to attend today. So that's perfect. Thank you.
All right, guys. Take good care.
Thank you.
Have a
Good
nice day.
luck.